got John Mackay on this one.
Yep.
That's good.
All right.
Okay, so John, I just kind of wanted to start by asking what the name of your organization is.
Okay, Creation Research, and we have a small office here in Canada and a bigger one in the USA and a big one in Australia.
Right, and where's your office in Canada located?
Over in Ontario, you know, where everything's supposed to happen.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people here, I think, would claim that a lot of our money gets funneled that way.
I believe I've heard that claim quite a few times.
Perfect. So what's the purpose or goal of your organization, Creation Research?
Okay, Creation Research is a group of Christians who are obviously involved with usually a scientific background, not always, who have come across the issue of, okay, if you're a Christian, what about dinosaurs, cavemen, ape men, the age of the world? And so, you know, we've been trying to figure out, what do we say to the layman? How do we deal with this? If you're a Christian, you believe the Bible is literal history, how do you fit this, that or the other thing in that the ordinary person is asking about? So I guess you could say the old word was it's an apologetics type ministry, coming up with explanations as to how things actually fit.
Right, okay. And so would you say that your ministry is kind of geared towards existing Christians, or is it geared towards converting non-believers? Or
well, since I come from outside the church in the first place, and you know, became a Christian through reading a textbook by an atheist, which of course proves God's got a great sense of humour, much of what I do is geared to the non-Christian, because that's my background, right? So I spend a lot of time in universities, colleges and schools, etc. But there's also, like this week we're here in Fort McMurray, and we have 6 days of meetings in one of the churches, plus a little bit of work in the oil sands mines and things like that. So it covers the whole spectrum.
Right. And so I guess that was going to be my next question. What kind of work are you doing specifically in Canada? Because you're Australian based, aren't you?
True blue, mate.
Right. So are you you're doing some work in Canada? Is that similar to your other work in Australia?
Yes, I will be in Canada for roughly a month on this trip. To give you sort of a broad spectrum of things we're doing, we've got one young man, we support his research here in Alberta, so I wanted to spend time with him, fossil collecting.
Would that be Vance Nelson?
That's Vance Nelson,
okay,
that's correct, yeah. And then up here I've got largely the public meetings, which you first saw and came across Creation Research. As well as that, while I'm here, we've got several days out in the field, because I believe God made the real world, so it's the real world you have to have answers about. I'll also be in Ontario, where we've got schools and churches. Then I've just got a report on some discovery of fossil trees in limestone in Nova Scotia, so I've ordered a plane flight across to there to spend a few days out in the field checking that out as part of a big venture documentary that we're releasing for Charles Darwin's bicentennial next year.
Right, right. And I think if I saw on your website, you've kind of thrown down the gauntlet to Richard Dawkins to
yes. Richard, of course, is one of the world's most pronounced atheistic evolutionists, and he's very arrogantly in favour of evolution and very anti-Christian and particularly anti-creation. So, yeah, we like to throw down gauntlets to people such as that.
Right, okay. And is that, I guess what I was going to ask is, do you see that as an effective tool for ministering to people, or?
Well, you'll find that if we can just step back a bit, one reason I got involved in this is that when I became a Christian, and people said, okay, you're involved in geology, you're involved in science, how do you explain the following? And I'll be honest, in those days I didn't really know how you explained the following, but there were so many people asking questions like that. I thought, well, God's got me here, I should, you know, be able to use my brains to try and find out a bit about the answers. Help, Lord, what are the answers? And so progressively more and more people started to ask, can you come and talk to us? Can you come and explain this? Can you come into our school? I ended up in Saskatchewan to run a big debate against 4 professors from the University of Saskatchewan, right? And, you know, to cut a long story short, they lost, I won, and it was a really, really good opportunity from then on to work in their public schooling system.
How do you determine who wins and loses in those debates? Is it kind of a popular opinion or the sense
of
the audience?
There's all sorts of ways. It depends on how you've organised the debate. So Like one of the debates I did at Northampton University, if I remember correctly, the debating club organised it, and they took an official vote at the end, right?
Oh, I see, okay.
Other times it'll be a show of hands of the audience.
Oh.
Other times it'll be the other professor, like one guy stood up and said, I can't beat that, and sat down, and obviously you've won by default.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of formal to informal debates.
Okay, well, I'd be very interested to see that debate with you. I've never actually sat in on a debate with you.
Well, we'll make the DVD available, and folks can get
excellent.
it off creationresearch.net.
I hope your challenge gets accepted by Dawkins, because I think that would be an interesting debate for sure. You described yourself earlier as an apologist.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider what you're doing to be scientific research or science, or?
Research is research, whether it's into politics or economics or theology or science, right? You have to be able to go and say, what is it that I'm trying to solve? How do I find information? What's the best possible arrangement of the data? So research is research. So we set it up as creation research, largely because when you use terms like creation and science together, people sort of have a line in their heads and think, no, creation's over there, science is over there.
Right.
Much of that is due to the way we sell science in the public education arena, so that our modern definition of science, quote unquote, the American Science Teachers Journal says science is any explanation, da-da-da-da-da, without reference to God. It's a naturalistic explanation. Now, as I love to point out, the minute you say it's a naturalistic explanation without reference to God, you've just made a reference to God. But what it means is our common person out there, even the university graduate, perceives of science as, on this side of the line there's science and facts, on this side of the line there's God and all sorts of religious stuff, and the two have got nothing to do with one another. And I love to remind them that when I first went to my university science faculty, carved in the sandstone over the door with the truth would set you free. Right. And I thought, where does that come from? Answer, Jesus Christ. So obviously, if the issue is science versus religion, you'll never solve it. If the issue is it true or is it false, then research is helpful.
Okay, so how do you have a theory or a hypothesis that you're trying to advance, or is it?
Well, when it comes to this issue, remember Charles Darwin, the theory of evolution, the origin of the species. Charles Darwin lived in a day when they didn't understand genetics, so he had no idea how evolution was supposed to occur. He didn't live long enough to see anything evolve, and he was the first to admit the fossils didn't show it, right? It's stated in the chapter on geology in his book. Therefore, he had a faith position about where life came from, not an objective, observed position, right? So the choice here is, do you put your faith in Darwin, who wasn't there, or do you put your faith in God, who was? There's no other real choices. It's a faith choice to start with, but then all of science is. A scientist, first of all, has to believe the world is real. I mean, you can find many religions that don't believe that. They sit on the ground and go, right, and they try to escape to another reality. So faith will always be involved in this, but without faith, you have the wrong faith, you'll deal with the facts incorrectly.
So your contention then is that scientists start with a bias and are trying to prove that? Is that?
Well, since you're not God and I'm not God, between the two of us, we don't know everything, right? And if we don't know everything, we have to make some assumptions. I'm assuming that you're a reliable interviewer at the moment, right?
Well, that's a pretty big assumption.
I hope it proves to be true. But that will be a faith-based assumption, right? So everybody has a faith component, and you can call it bias, you can call it prejudice, and the question is, which bias is the best bias to be biased with, not whether you've got one or not.